Hello everyone, welcome back to ESCplus. Adrian Valiente here again with another episode of the interview we filmed with Nicoline Refsing, one of the most prolific stage directors, content producer, artistic directors that Eurovision current era has ever seen, I would say. As you can see, the first part of the interview was uploaded on ESCplus España YouTube channel, where she was telling us about Blas Cantó and what she was supposed to do with Universo for Rotterdam 2020. But now she's here with us to bring us her story, her background, what she's been doing for all those years and how she connected to Eurovision and whom she's been working with. Greatest artists like One Direction, Leona Lewis, Pink are just a few examples. But if you want to find out more, stay with us and enjoy the video.
This is another question that I wanted to ask you. Do you watch, again, all the projects that you are involved afterwards?
No, I mean, I watch them, but not as just a lot of the time, if I'm showing people my work, I watch it and I explain how I've worked with different things and what's, there's certain moments where you think, this is a great emotional moment, and I'll explain how we created that with camera, with lighting, with working with the artist and all the scenery, and so because things are not a coincidence, even though when we make it look like it is, it's best.
And then did you always wanted to focus your career always on this side, like on the artistic side of creating for someone?
Yeah.
How was it? How did you come up?
Yeah, it's it was very specific because it's so I was doing my master's in Copenhagen at a design school, and I worked in it was called spacious design, and then I was introduced to production design very early in my career, and I just thought, I get it, I completely get it, and it was just like all the pieces came together, and I'm like, this is how I communicate in space. This is how I can tell a story in a spacious connection. So then I started working with production design and focusing all my work and studies into that specific area. And actually, I did graduate in production design, creating a live concert. But the real point of no return for me was when I saw Rolling Stones in a big stadium concert in Copenhagen,
Wow.
Bridges to Babylon, and it's one of Mark's designs, obviously. And back then you didn't even know. I mean, now growing up in Denmark, I had no idea people were actually designing concerts, but it was so spectacular. It was just, I thought I'd come to heaven. I thought it was just, and I thought, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
What a nice beginning then. Yeah, it's without having that memory.
It was I'll never forget it. It was so fantastic. So that was the moment. And then there was a few years finding out who actually designed these concerts and how did I get to work for him, and all the steps that's been in my path. It wasn't until I was doing my graduation project. One of the lighting designers from Denmark, who's was my mentor, he came in and he said, "Do you realize it's the same guy who's designed all the big Rolling Stones, all the big U2, and the big Pink Floyd?" And I was doing some work. I think I was putting up some boards for my presentation or something like that. And I turned around and I looked at him and I said, "I'm going to work for this guy."
Wow, that gives me chills. Actually, that's like how it sounds, how promising, how you were chasing your dream to go behind something is definitely what makes it more special, even more special. In the future when you then think about it afterwards. So cool to listen to it. There's also.
Your question is, I've always known this is what I wanted to do, and it's always been the same thing.
And that leads me to ask you, who gives you inspiration?
Everything. I mean, primarily the artist, the music, the lyrics. it's when I studied, I developed a sort of a model for my way of working, which was a triangle, where I said, there's an artist, there's music, and there's lyrics, but within that, there's got to be a unique expression for everything. And that's still the way I work. I still that's my approach. And that's, I think, or hope at least, that's how everything I do is very unique, because I don't, it's not like you'll never see me come to a presentation and say, okay, so here's the latest references from that performance on the Billboard and that performance on the EMAs or something like that. That's not how I work at all. I thought, so my reference it can be everything, but a lot of artists inspires me, like painters or sculptures, but it can be anything. I walk outside and I see a leaf or something else that inspires me.
Yeah. So, and then talking about inspiration, how did you come up with the idea of establishing yourself as a company, and not by going solo? I mean, you're going solo, I guess, but why as a company? That's something I want the viewers to know. Like, why Rockart Design and not Nicoline Refsing Design, for example?
Yeah, it's a very good question, but I think it's probably more technical than anything else.
Okay.
So I always wanted to have my own business, and I always wanted an international design company. But there was a few things sort of more technical than anything else. I thought when I worked with Mark Fisher, we in the 6 years I was there, we went through a transition where it was partly about growing the business. So it went from Mark Fisher's studio to Stufish. And of course, the problem Mark had was how to scale up. When you become that big, an artist or icon, clients, would they work with me instead of Mark or Ray or any of the other great designers in the studio? And how do you do it? So he thought there was some psychology in the name. So he started changing the name from Mark Fisher Studio and then to Stufish. And I think, that was very clever. Not at least, now where sadly Mark passed away, the studio is still one of the biggest and most successful studios in the world. And they've maintained that because it's Stufish rather than Mark Fisher Studio. So that was one of the reasons. The other thing is in UK, if you have a company, it's a different legal setup to if you're only a sole trader, and hopefully we'll never have an accident or anything, but as long as you have a business, it's a more professional setup. Yeah, I think those were the reasons. Not as creative or artistic as such, but yeah. And then I fell in love with the name. The name was a very big part of, I was playing with these ideas before I started up, and how do you do it, and what's a good name and all of that. So I love the name.
And I also like what you mentioned about the triangle. It's very important. There are several elements to work on when it comes to a set design or an artist, or you want to portray story, you want to recreate something that the people feel it. The people are going to feel what they are listening, what they are watching. It's very important. And there is music, it's feelings, lyrics, the expression of the singer. Everything comes into play at the same moment, and everything evokes something you need to put into play by getting the most necessary elements, the most important elements of everything. So how do you actually combine this? Because I guess it's different with every project you have been involved. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a tour, a TV show, a singer, just a performance itself, or how challenging it can get.
Well, so I think I'm very fortunate because I work with intuition.
Okay.
So I work with the basis that if I feel something and I feel it's right and I feel it's very strong, other people will respond in the same way. And I thought about it today. I thought, how could I explain this to you? And there was a very significant moment in my life where I realized what that was. And that was actually in Spain. When we were students, my best friends, when we were students, she won tickets to go to Spain.
Okay.
So we went around Spain for 3 weeks, and we saw an incredible amount of art and culture and everything from bullfights. But obviously we went through all the big museums and also some of the small ones. There was a collection, it was a private collection, I can't remember the name of it. And we went through that collection, and there was one particular painting that just captured me, and I couldn't, I was so fascinated by it. I didn't know it, I didn't know the artist. And then when I came out of the museum, and I think there was 2 other paintings that really touched me. And when I came out of that museum, I realized that those were the actual masterpieces. Okay. And then I thought, now I get it. It's not a masterpiece because somebody has decided it's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece because it connects with so many people. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. It does. It really does.
So I know
the success is there, as you say.
Yeah, because it it's a masterpiece because so many people feel it and get touched by it, and then it's relatable. So in a way, I thought it was a very democratic way of approaching art, rather than it being, because I think art is a lot of time people think is maybe something elitist, or you don't necessarily understand all the theory behind it. And I don't think you have to. I think, art is what connects you, and if you feel a connection to something, that's a message that succeeded.
And when it comes to do your job, to develop your job, when you are approached for a project and then you have to put your eyes specifically on something, is there any time during the process that you enjoy the most, or sometimes that it becomes too tricky or tough?
I think it's very, what I love the most about the process is that it's so different. Okay. And I love the whole process. I love the different chapters of the process, and then for me they're very, very different. So the first chapter is to understand what is this performance about, what's the song about, what's the lyric about, and also get to know the artist and see what's really behind this artist, and how can I tell that story. And then I go away and I have a very quiet time where I just want to be left by myself and have this quiet space and sit here and look at the river, and just listen to the music 100 times, see what's coming up for me, what's the story I get. And then it becomes a very technical thing, because then I'm using all my technical skills and experience in creating something that I can tell other people. So this is the story I'm going to tell, and I'm going to tell it in this way, with this set, with this lighting, with these cameras, and this is how we're going to do it. And then once that's all decided within the creative team, I'll start working with the production team. And then it becomes even more technical, so how do we create this? How do we get it in and out? And, with the Eurovision, one of the challenges is the very, very short turnaround time. It means, the time you have from one performance is set on stage to the next one is in and performed, which is probably the shortest I've ever worked with in any show. So there's a lot of technical details to how do we make it work. So, for instance, an example of that was when we were in Poland with Melani. We had these big fishnets with recycled plastic.
Yeah, the bottles, the plastic.
And of course, they had to roll them up, get them in on stage, hang them, dress them, and make sure they were in the right place for the performance. And we had such a short time. I think it's maybe 20 or 30 seconds to do it. Very, very, 40 seconds maybe. It's very, very short time. And they came back and they said, we can't do it. We can't. They entangle, all the plastic entangles in all the netting and all of that. And I said, but you need to put blankets on. You need to take a big drape and then roll it. So you've got netting and then blanket, so it doesn't entangle, and then you can just roll it up and then it's fixed.
Yeah.
And they rehearsed it overnight, and the next morning it was fine. So there's that sort of technical way of making sure that we actually achieve what I want. And then there's the next phase, when we go on site. There's obviously the rehearsal, which is another phase where I'm very focused with the artist and how we make things work and how we create this and make it bigger than we thought it could ever be. That sort of being very open and dialogue between people, where we expand the creative process to be bigger than what any of us could create on our own.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go on site and we do the camera rehearsals and a bit of PR and all of those, which is a very sort of more extrovert part of the process.
And then this time that you mentioned Melanie with the fishnets, were you in charge of Basim's cliche love song? Do you remember in Copenhagen with the big?
No.
You were not in charge with that one, but it gets challenging when you hang things from the ceiling. Yeah. It gets really challenging, I guess.
Yeah. No, we created the content for it, the background. Okay. But the idea about the drape was from the Danish production.
Okay. Okay, and now we have seen many different sides of you by taking a look at all those performances you have mentioned. If we can describe it I would say, because you see different expressions of the person who is working behind them as well. And then there can be some organic stuff, then there could be some digital world depicted as well, or organic elements, or I don't know, realness, consciousness, and I don't know, just to mention a few. When it comes to, I don't know, Francesca, Nicoline, Melanie, Dami Im, Aminata, all of them. Why are all of them very different, but at the same time have Nicoline Refsing in there?
Well, I don't know the Nicoline Refsing, but people see, they can see the same thing. But obviously, I've got my way of working, and I've got different things I know works. But the reason why they're very different is because they're very different. So I think back to the way I describe my inspiration, it's always for me the artist. Mm-hmm. It's who is in front of me. That's what I work with, and I think that's why it's always unique when I create something, because it's every artist, every person is unique, and it's about finding out what's inside of that person.
And that leads me as well again to another question, which is related to a national final. So sometimes, like in Latvia with Aminata, you have had to work with something which has previously done. Like Aminata came from a national final, for example, and she had already something which was not like, I don't know, I wouldn't describe it like nothing, because like she was performing on stage in Latvia and everything. But the thing is it different when you have to create nothing from nothing, or when you have something already primarily speaking by itself, and then you have to take it to the stage of Eurovision?
With Aminata, there was a few things they wanted to keep. They wanted to keep the top shot where she's doing that choreography with her arms, and they wanted to keep the red dress, or the red collar. It's a different dress, but the red collar. No, I think it's fine. I think as long as it works, but so my expertise is to scale up.
Okay.
So make it work on an international level, and make it work from because what works in your national selection may be very different to what works on an international level, and also how do you engage the whole of Europe to vote for you? That's a very big challenge, because what people connect with in Scandinavia is very different to what they connect in the Latin part or the Eastern part. So it's got to be something that works for everybody, and also to give it that professional international level.
Yeah.
So that's really where my expertise is.
And that's also very connected to the next question, the next question that I wanted to say, because like you if you're working for an international approach, or you want it to be like very international, very big, how do you describe the eye of the public, or set yourself in the role of the public? Like, would you be watching as a mere spectator? Like, have you ever, when you create something that big, do you set yourself in the role of the audience? First of all, like, you go into the audience and like, as you, if you were one more.
Always. This is, I mean, with Eurovision in particular, because the viewer ratings are so high. So you may have 7,000 live audience in the arena, whereas you have, in some cases over 200 million viewers at home. So of course you weigh the experience and say, if there's a compromise, and say this may not work as well in the arena, but it works great on TV, the TV wins. But my background is so much rock and roll that I always think the live has to work. And I think the best result is when you can show something that's really authentic. When you have the live audience responding to the performance, that validates the performance, that makes it real. When we have that shot of somebody who's actually in tears because they're touched so much by this performance. When I watch this on screen at home, it touches me. It gives me a sense of this is authentic. I'm a part of something that's really authentic. And of course, Eurovision, because it's a live show, it's direct broadcast, there's no delay. You are a part of it. You are, even though you're at home and you're watching it from your sofa, and you are part of it because it's a live event.
And then the steps of everything that you have been doing, not only Eurovision, but there's a long list of stuff that you have been creating. I remember the Queen Elizabeth opening ceremony in 2010, for instance, or I don't know, Westlife's Pink, or Leona Lewis, or One Direction as well, I guess.
Yeah.
Everything is big. Like, I don't know if you could even choose from one, but because everything is different, every experience is different, and you get to express yourself in a different way depending on, as you said, the artist, the song, the concept, and actually the task, because it's not the same thing to follow a contest itself, a tour itself, rather than just a one performance. So, but is any of the experiences something that you said, oof, I was touched, very touched by the experience at the Eurovision in Copenhagen, for instance. I love everything that I've done, but this experience, for instance, was very challenging, and I then felt like really good with myself, for example, after doing it, because I felt that I found what I needed to express.
That's a good question. I love all my work.
Sometimes I do very tricky questions as well, but the thing I like so much into it, like I really want to know. That's why.
I love all my work, and I think and also when when we talk about the Eurovision performances, they're all my babies. They all, I still talk with all the artists, and I want to know that they are doing well, and that they're happy and they're fulfilled in their artistic path, and we meet when they're in London, and it's lovely in that way. I think, I mean, I see it maybe as different chapters. There was a chapter when I was working with Mark and Stufish, and there was a chapter when I was first starting off on my own, and then I think Eurovision is a chapter on its own, and I think the years that I did the Brit Awards were very special. There was a fantastic production team around that, and creative team. and I loved that. And back then, it was such a big job, and I was very privileged to get to do it. Back then I would design the whole set, and then a lot of the bands as well. So in a way, there was a lot of artistic input in it. Now it's more different. I think the set is one thing, and then the record labels more come with separate designers and bring it together, a bit like Eurovision. But back then it was, I created most of it, and it was fantastic because also I had the artistic control throughout the whole show, and I always pushed and said, if you watch an award show for hours and hours, at least make it visually interesting. And I wanted, one of the things I always wanted was whenever there was a band on, I wanted a completely change of scene. I wanted a complete different story. So we had the main set, and back then we did very sort of strong storytelling sets. There was always themes so you could remember them. There's the tattoo year, there was the festival year, there was the glam and punk year, and in that sense it was the set of the year became the brand on its own. And then I thought every performance should have its own life and be unique and completely different to anything else. So to be able to do all of that was just extraordinary. And then I think another big one was when I got to design the Pink Funhouse tour. Which was ended up being a terrific show. I mean, it really was a great show, and it was a funny one because I was working with Mark, and he was sort of the face towards the production and the artist, and then I was creating everything in the background for it. She did that spectacular album, the Funhouse, and it was that sort of terrible heartbreak with her boyfriend or husband. I can't remember if they were married at that time. And there was that sort of double meaning of the Funhouse, of it both being that sort of, I'm going to have so much fun, you'll never forget it, but also the horrible side of it. And creating a set which could give her a framework which was so strong, because I thought we designed a few of her previous tours, and I thought she's such a strong artist. She's got so many views and ideas, and she's so powerful. I mean, she's really so wonderful. It's fantastic. I mean, as a woman, you just think, wow, she's just amazing. But I thought sometimes in her concerts she was doing so much, it was almost confusing as an audience. So I thought I'll try and give her a framework that's so strong that she can never break out of that concert. And then of course everything aligned. There was fantastic lighting by Beth Halpin, and the content told the story. The costumes were so spectacular. So it all sort of just lined up to be this Funhouse storytelling. So I thought that was a very spectacular show.
It sounds great. Like everything, because like you seem really passionate, and that's the first step to approach something. And it doesn't matter if it's Eurovision, if it's the X Factor, for instance, or as you mentioned, the shows that you've been involved, everything seems to be different. And the thing is that combining stuff at the same time, but being yourself, and at the same time being able to deliver something different from everything, it's what makes it everything unique. So yeah, that's why. And if we go to Eurovision again, I wanted to go deeper in the thing with Blas as well. And but first of all, and because people in Spain are very excited about your work since Melani achieved the third place at the Junior Eurovision. But first of all, let's talk about how do you see the contest yourself, because it suffered a big evolution, technical, artistical, and in many sides. And Denmark, from the country where you come from, has a very long tradition in Eurovision as well, having won twice, but having this massive Dansk Melodi Grand Prix every year.
I think they've won more than twice.
Twice.
At least 3 times.
Three times. Yeah, with the Olsen brothers, with this Dance Visa, and then Emily de Forest. Yeah, those 3 times. And you have this Dance Melody Grand Prix as well. So it's got its own evolution, and then Eurovision suffered its own evolution as well. So how do you say yourself? What is your first memory of Eurovision, and how do you see the change?
Oh, as a child, I loved Eurovision. I just thought it was fantastic, and it was I was a bit sort of the dark sheep because my parents lived in a commune, and it was sort of very hippie and all of that, and I just loved the glitter, and I loved the pop music, and my parents were sort of, oh, terrible, she loves pop music, how is that? I love rock as well. I'm a big fan of rock music, no doubt about it. But you know, I could just tell those sort of the other people in the hippie community. You know, when I was like, oh, I just love Eurovision. I love the show. I love the glitter. I love all of it. And they were like, you know, so I would take my little tape recorder every year, and I would try to, you know, record it with putting it up against the loudspeaker on the TV to get a recording of it. So I had the numbers, because then I would dance and, you know, have the numbers before I could get the tape out. And you would have this recording with very, very cynical comments from the other people or grown-ups around it about how horrible the show was, and I had to live with it every time I played it back and forth. You know, these horrible comments about the show was in the background, because it was, you know, it was not really the thing to do. But so I was very fascinated by it, and it's funny because there was somebody, I saw a post about when the Olsen brothers were winning in Stockholm, and I remember that night so vividly, because I can't remember if was it in 2000?
Yeah, in the Globen in Stockholm, yes, in 2000.
Yeah, so it was a year before my graduation, but I think I was doing my final project for the year, so I've been working late, and it was summer. It was such a lovely, you know, Copenhagen in the summer is just the best.
Yeah.
So I was riding back on my bicycle from the design school, and I thought, what's going on? Because everybody had their windows open, and then sometimes there would just be this wah, big cheer through all of Copenhagen, and I thought it must be a big football match on or something like that. So I came home, turned the TV on, and realized it was the Eurovision. So it was, so that was very special.
Nicoline, thank you so very much for your time, and thank you so much for bringing us a bit more of who you are. Now, people, viewers, stay tuned for the next and the last part of the interview, which will be talking about Eurovision 2014 and Nicoline's involvement in the contest, where she will be, you know, telling us secrets about what Conchita Wurst did on stage, what Ruth Lorenzo from Spain wanted to do, and how did everything finish, ended up with Austria winning and Spain in their last top 10 position. So for now, stay tuned, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell in case you don't want to miss any of our content. Thank you so much for being with us.